Hey ladies and gentlemen, in this video we are going to be talking about quadratic functions. More specifically, we are going to be talking about how to solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. So first thing that I want to do is review the quadratic formula with you. So go ahead and pause this video and copy down the notes. The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now where do the a and the b come from? Well, if you continue down on the left-hand side, the a represents the coefficient in front of the x squared. The b represents the coefficient in front of x, and c just represents the coefficient that stands alone. A couple things that you need to remember when solving quadratic equations is that the quadratic formula will solve all quadratic equations. When solving, you are finding the x-intercepts of a parabola. So when we get into graphing quadratic equations, solving will be helpful. And a reminder that whenever you're solving in a quadratic equation, it must always be set equal to 0. Let's try solving a few using the quadratic formula. So the first thing that I want you to do is identify your a, your b, and your c within this quadratic equation. So in this case, the a is 2 because that's the number that's in front of x squared. The b is negative 8, and the c is the negative 24 because that's the coefficient that stands alone. Now when we go ahead and plug this into our quadratic formula, let me just go ahead and rewrite it here. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now when you solve these quadratic equations, you want to make sure that you don't skip any steps or try to do too much all at once, because that's where negatives get lost and so forth. So really slow down and take your time. So x equals the opposite of my b value, which is negative 8, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 8 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 24, all over 2 times 2, which is my a value. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and start simplifying this, putting things together. So, for example, I'm going to simplify the opposite of negative 8, which is going to be a positive 8, plus or minus the square root. Negative 8 squared is 64, minus 4 times 2 times negative 24 is negative 192. So, ladies and gentlemen, I just took this minus sign and I just brought it down straight into my simplifying. The negative that you see with the negative 192 comes from the negative 24. All of that divided by divided by 4. 2 times 2 is 4. I'm going to go ahead and continue simplifying the inside. So I have x equals 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus a negative 192, which is 256 divided by 4. Now we can simplify this into two sections. Remember, the plus and the minus gives us our two x-intercepts. So when we're calculating our first one, we're going to take 8 plus the square root of 256 divided by 4. And for our second one, we're going to take 8 minus the square root of 256 divided by 4. When I simplify this, 8 plus the square root of 256, I get 24 divided by 4, which ultimately equals 6. So since we're finding x-intercepts, I'm going to write it as a point. So it's going to be 6, 0. That's my x-intercept. Now I'm going to do the next one. 8 minus the square root of 256, I get negative 8 divided by 4, which equals negative 2. So my other x-intercept is going to be negative 2, 0. Why didn't that write? Let's try that again. Ladies and gentlemen, what you see in purple are going to be the two answers that I'm looking for. Let's try another one. A equals 1 because that is the coefficient in front of x squared. B equals -4 because that is the coefficient in front of x. And C equals -8, the coefficient that stands alone. Go ahead and plug it into the quadratic formula. So x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I always like to write the formula just because it's a good foundation. Helps me remember what needs to go where. Now I'm going to go ahead and start plugging things in. So x equals the opposite of my b value. Notice that I'm not simplifying right now. -4 squared minus 4 times 1 times my c value, which is -8, all over 2 times 1. Now I'm going to go ahead and start simplifying. So x equals the opposite of -4, which is +4, plus or minus the square root. -4 squared is +16, minus, because of this minus right here, 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times -8 is -32, all over 2. Simplify the inside. X equals 4 plus or minus 16 minus -32 equals 48. Square root of 48 divided by 2. Here's where I'm going to split it up into two different parts because I'm looking for the two x-intercepts. Now, I know that square root of 48 is not a perfect square, so I am going to get decimals with these answers. So when I do this, I'm going to take 4 plus the square root of 48, divide that by 2, and my x-intercept, so 4 plus the square root of 48 divided by 2, my x-intercept is going to be 5.46, 0. All right, there's my x-intercept. There's a decimal right there. And then my next one is going to be 4 minus the square root of 48 divided by 2. And when I calculate that, my x-intercept is going to be -1.46. Whoops. 0. Another one. Now, I put this example in here because it's a reminder for us that all quadratic equations must be set equal to 0, and currently this one is not. So I first need to alter it by adding 6 to both sides, giving me my new equation to say 2x squared plus 11x plus 6 equals 0.
Jesse Newell, please come to the main office. Jesse Newell, please come to the main office.
Now, again, I'm going to go ahead and identify my A, B, and C value. So A would be 2, because that's a coefficient that's attached to the x squared. B is 11, and C is 6, because that's a coefficient that stands by itself. Plugging it into my quadratic equation, x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I'm going to go ahead and start plugging in my values. So opposite of 11 plus or minus the square root of 11 squared minus 4 times 2 times 6 all over 2 times 2. I'm going to go ahead and start simplifying now. So I'm going to have x equals -11 plus or minus the square root. 11 squared is 121 minus 4 times 2 is 8 times 6 is 48 divided by 4. I'm going to bring this up to the top now so I have a little bit more room to write. X equals negative 11 plus or minus the square root of 121 minus 48, 73, all over 4. Again, I know that the square root of 73 is not going to be a perfect square, so I can either give the decimal answer, which when you're watching this video, giving the decimal answer would be the approximate answer. If I'm asking for the exact answers of the x-intercepts, I would want you to write it like this. Okay, so that's how you would give me the exact answer. In the previous example, we did the approximate answer by providing the decimals. Sometimes it's not the coefficient that's by itself on the other side, but sometimes it's the x's or the x squareds. So again, we need all quadratic equations to be equal to 0 before we can continue solving. So I have the equation x squared plus 4x plus 5 equal to 0. Equal to 0. Again, my a value is 1 because that's the number in front of x squared. B happens to be 4, and C happens to be 5. X equals the opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. Okay, so using that as my foundation, now I'm going to begin plugging my values in. So X equals the opposite of 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. I'm going to go ahead and start simplifying now. So X equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 4 times 1 is 4 times 5 is 20 divided by 2. Again, I'm going to bring that up to the top so I have more room. With that, now I have negative 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 divided by 2. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is not going to be a sufficient answer anymore because we do know how to simplify a square root of negative. So that's what I would expect from you. So pull out that negative and turn that into an I. So I have I times the square root of 4. But the square root of 4 can be simplified to 2I. So really, that is the same as 2I. So I have negative 4 plus or minus 2I divided by 2. You can simplify this even further with negative 4 divided by 2, which is negative 2, plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1, so I. Now what this answer really means is that this quadratic does not touch the x-axis, but because of the type of polynomial that it does have some imaginary zeros. I would like you to pause this video and try this one on your own. We'll talk about it on Wednesday. Whoops. Your homework assignment is the Solving Quadratics worksheet that you will find on Google Classroom. And if you are interested in an extra credit opportunity, here's what I'm proposing. So if you're not, you can go ahead and stop the video and start working on your assignment. But if you are interested, here's what I'd like to see. The quadratic formula is very popular, and you can put it to practically any type of music. So what I'd like to see is your own creativity of taking the quadratic formula and plugging it into some popular music, such as the Whip Nene or Hit the Quan, okay? Some of those more recent ones. In the past, people have done it to One Thing by One Direction, Soulja Boy, a couple of Adele songs. So I'd like you to find your own song that I can't YouTube and find it there. I'd like you to record yourself and then share it with me. In regards to a deadline for this video or this recording, let's have it be a week from Friday. So October 9th, I think it is.